This is the story of how my dad was taken away. I continue to visit him from time to time, and I can say he even appears to have found some sort of peace, but he will never be released. At the end of each visit, he always grips my hands and tells me to watch out for that giant moose. Every time, even though so many years have passed since that summer when we first saw the giant moose, my family, Mom, Dad, and Robbie, and I had first seen the injured giant moose a few weeks before Dad's final breakdown during a visit to a local wildlife park in our region. We had wandered round the grassy enclosures, looking at the animals, nothing especially exotic. I remember beavers and otters and deer and a couple of wolves, lying back from the wired fences and watching us indolently through their sharp yellow eyes. Birds too, eagles and hawks and others with bright feathers, flitting around their large dome-shaped cages. Peacocks wandered freely on the narrow open trails, and Robbie toddled about, feeding them, or trying to. The wounded giant moose was not in an open enclosure. It was housed in a small shed, and a notice by the door alerted visitors that the moose was injured and receiving veterinary treatment. There was a sharp, horrible smell hanging around the hut, and flies buzzed around us. We had all peered in on the moose through the small window, though the smell was sharper, and at first it looked completely dark inside the shed. Dad had picked me up and held me close to the window so I could get a better look. Despite the dark, I could see the wound in his neck quite clearly. The gaping sides of the wound quivered. In time with the moose's heavy, labored breathing, we wondered how the injury happened. The moose turned his head and looked directly into my eyes. The smell and the sight of blood made me feel queasy, and I looked back at Dad and asked him to put me back down. He had laughed, told me not to be such a wuss, held me up higher and gripped me tighter. I had started screaming and squirming, begging him to put me down. Mom had murmured, "Oh, put her down, will you?" and then started wandering away, pushing Robbie, who was still in a push hair in those days. Finally, Dad put me down, and we followed Mom and Robbie, Dad still laughing at my silliness over the moose. We all got into the car to leave. Before the car moved, the giant moose with the wounded neck suddenly appeared, seemingly out of nowhere by the car, and brought its massive head down and peered in at us through the car window. It happened so quickly that I was startled and gave a small scream. Dad swore loudly and swerved off. Mom didn't tell him off as she usually would for swearing. When we got home, the moose was already in the garden, peering in through our windows, the blood from its injury gleaming red in the late afternoon sun. "What the actual fuck?" yelled Dad. "I'm going to call the police." "Wait a minute," said Mom, who had already pulled out her mobile. "Everybody stay in the car." Mom called the park and asked about the moose, carefully avoiding saying it was in our garden. I remember that clearly. The park person told her the moose had died earlier that day, just about the time we would have been leaving the park. So Dad didn't call the police, and the moose just stood there in our garden, looking in on us through our windows. Nobody else could see him, just us, none of the neighbors, no one. We realized that from the beginning. None of us even bothered asking. He was always there, just for us. He was silent, only moving his wounded, bloody neck to lower or raise his giant antlered head, sometimes looking through the ground floor windows, sometimes craning his neck high to look through the windows on the first floor. It didn't matter if we drew the curtains. He'd still be there, trying to peer through. He didn't hurt us, but was always there watching us. When we left the house to go out, he would turn to watch us leave, and then stand there silently on our return, watching us enter. Only Robbie didn't really mind him, although I knew he could see him. It must have been only a few weeks later. Summer was over, but the weather was still warm. We had not really gotten used to the moose, but it was clear Dad didn't like it when we talked about him. So, we didn't. I glanced outside my bedroom window. The giant moose was there as always in the garden, bent down, looking into the living room window. Mom and Robbie must have been there. That must be why he was looking in on them. If the living room had been empty, I knew he would be at my window, his neck craned high and staring right in at me. I would see the gaping open wound on his neck close up, the details of blood and sinewy muscle fresh and clear in the early afternoon sun. Even from the distance of the bedroom window, I could still see the wound. I tried to concentrate on my homework. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, followed by the sound of shattering glass and Mom's scream. Even though I knew I shouldn't, I ran to the window. I couldn't help it. Dad was firing at the giant moose, who stood there immobile as always and continued looking in through the window, undisturbed. Mom was screaming my name. My window shattered, and I felt the warm spray of blood on my face. I ran under the bed, and the gunshots continued. The pain started. Eventually, after a very long time, the police came and took Dad away. Mom had only been slightly injured from the shattered glass, and I was soon fine too. It was clear Dad hadn't been aiming at us. Mom and Robbie and I moved to a new high-rise apartment building close to the city center, with no garden. We never saw the moose again. These events start with me and two of my friends Bernard and Hector coming back from a long weekend at the Cape Cod for any non-New Englanders here. Me and my buddies grew up with each other in Worcester, Massachusetts, and once college came around, we all kinda split up. Hector moved to Providence, Rhode Island, and Bernard was just always busy with school while I was busy working in the trades. We decided to find a time where all of us weren't busy and ended up renting a house out in Yarmouth for the Memorial Day weekend to just chill and hit the beach. After a great weekend of getting drunk and partying like we used to, it was time to head home. We took my car there, which was perfect for the beach. My Volvo C70 convertible. After packing all our bags in the car, we start driving back around 9 or 9:30 p.m. on Monday, back to Providence, to drop off Hector. To beat the traffic, I hopped off I-495 onto Route 44 going through Taunton, and was just going to follow that all the way to Providence. It was getting late, must have been around 10:30-ish at this point, and was pitch black outside, no moon or stars in sight tonight. As we were driving just passing Taunton, about 3 or 4 miles passing the city limits, we see him. A dirty-looking, fiery, long red-haired and red-bearded looking hobo wearing a red flannel, filthy blue jeans, and a giant backpack on his back holding his thumb out. As we pass him, I look over to my buddies and say, "Nobody else is gonna be on this road for miles, and he's out in the middle of nowhere. We might as well help him out," I say. "Fuck that, he looks sketchy, dude," said Bernard. "Yeah, I'm not trying to sit back here with him. Let's just go home, I'm tired as fuck," said Hector. "Alright, whatever, I'm stopping for gas at the next gas station though. I'm almost on E." We drive for about another 2 miles until we see the next gas station, and I fill up my tank and go inside and grab some snacks with my friends. Getting back in the car, I put my key in the ignition, and just our luck, my fucking battery is dead. I knew I should have changed the battery before this trip. I was just being lazy and not even considering it being a problem. As we all stand outside my car trying to figure out what to do and who to call to get a jump, we see the hitchhiker walking up to us. There's no way this guy caught up with us this fast. It's impossible. Even if he full sprinted for the 2 miles when we first passed him, there's no fucking way this guy could have caught up with us. "Why you boys need a jump?" This is the first thing he said to us in a gravely smoker's voice. How would he know we needed a jump in the first place? We were just 3 kids standing outside at the gas pump, and there's no way he would know that if there was a problem, that it was a dead battery. Bernard spoke up, "The battery is dead. Don't suppose you can help us?" "Actually, I can," said the hitchhiker as he reached in his giant backpack and pulled out a jump pack. "Shit, thanks man, you're a lifesaver," I said. I popped the hood and he hooked up the cables, turned on the jump pack, and I started my car right up. "Thanks man, really appreciate it. We gotta get home now," said Hector with a kind of "thanks dude, now get the fuck out of here" tone. "Hey see, can you boys do me a favor? I just need a ride to Rehoboth. Why, you can just drop me off once we get a little bit past the town line, and I'll walk the rest of the way. I see that you're driving that way anyway, and I really need the help right now boys," said the hitchhiker. I looked to my friends knowing that we pretty much don't have a choice. I mean, as weird as this guy seems, he did just help us, and he doesn't seem dangerous. Sure, he smells like weak old piss, but a 10-minute ride into a town we were already passing through seems like the least we can do for helping us out. Yeah, sure, man, hop in, I say. OT, thank you, man. I really needed this, the hitchhiker said with a large toothy grin, revealing his dark yellow teeth and puffy bright red gums. He hopped in the back seat with Hector, who was looking very visibly uncomfortable. Bernard rode shotgun, and I hopped back in the driver's seat and took off from the gas station back into the pitch black night. Pulling off from the gas station, we start driving with the hitchhiker and us staring out the window, not saying a word. It was deathly silent in the car because for some reason my radio wasn't picking up any channels, which was weird cause it's not like we were out in the boonies. Sure, it was quiet and not a lot of houses around, but not even a local station. Also broke my Accord, so we couldn't even plug in a phone to listen to music that way. After about 5 minutes of silent driving, Hector tries to make conversation with the hitchhiker. So man, where are you from? No response from the hitchhiker. You from around here? Still no response. Yo, can you hear me, man? The hitchhiker breaks out in an ear-piercing laughter. It took us all by shock, and I lost control of the wheel momentarily from the sudden outburst. The laugh was so loud and encompassing you could barely hear anyone or anything else. Bernard was holding his hands over his ears screaming, "What the fuck?" which was barely audible over the laughter. I was cringing and covering my right ear with my hand as my left was holding onto the wheel, and Hector was screaming something that wasn't audible to me at the hitchhiker and reached out to grab him. When he put a hand on his shoulder, the hitchhiker grabbed Hector's hand, turned his head to look at Hector with wide eyes, pulled out a knife from his pocket and stabbed Hector 3 times in the chest. Me and Bernard are staring in awe at what we just saw from the front seat, and as I tried to pull over and slamming on the brakes, the hitchhiker lunges at me and grabs the wheel, still screeching his crazy laugh. He yanks the wheel to the right, going directly into the woods, and even though I was slamming on the brakes and tugging back at the wheel, it still wasn't good enough to avoid the tree. I slammed my head on the steering wheel in the crash and was knocked unconscious for a few seconds. When I look around, the front end of the car was smashed in and smoking. The airbags were deployed. Bernard was bleeding from his head, just like I was, and Hector was on the floor in the back, clutching his chest, struggling to breathe with blood coming from his mouth. All this with no sign of the hitchhiker. I shake Bernard, trying to get him out of his daze, and as I'm shaking him, I look through the passenger window next to him, and for a split second, I saw the hitchhiker's face in the window, smiling from the outside. I jumped back in fear and quickly wiped the sweat and blood from my forehead, wound out of my eyes, and once I did, the hitchhiker was gone from the window. I frantically looked around, seeing where he could have gone, and jump out of the car with a sudden burst of adrenaline. I run around all over the car and the immediate area, and the hitchhiker is nowhere in sight. Bernard, now coming out of his daze, opens his door and falls out. Running to his side, I help him to his feet. "Hector," I screamed in the back seat. "Hector, are you okay, bro?" I screamed. "Help me," he said, gurgling up more blood onto his chin. "Help me grab him out." Bernard screamed, still obviously out of it. Me and Bernard pull Hector from out of the wreckage and lay him up against a tree. Bernard calls the cops, screaming to get an ambulance to us and that some homeless guy stabbed our friend and crashed our car. The police and ambulance showed up after 5 minutes. I guess we were lucky that we were so close to Rehoboth, or else Hector might not have made it. As the EMTs rushed Hector on the stretcher into the ambulance, 2 other EMTs showed up in another ambulance and tended to mine and Bernard's injuries. The police started asking me and Bernard questions about what happened and how our friend got stabbed. When we explained the whole situation and that a red-headed homeless guy stabbed Hector and crashed my car, the cops got wide-eyed and looked at each other awkwardly. They put away their notepads and told us they would look into it. What? What do you mean you'll look into it? The fucking guy is still out there in the woods or around here somewhere. He didn't just fucking disappear, Bernard said. We have other units looking right now, son, trust me. "Now go with the EMTs, they want to take a closer look at both of you," said one of the younger cops. "What do you mean you didn't even call anything in?" I chimed in. "Go now, kid, we'll take care of it," the younger cop's partner said. Me and Bernard were quickly shuffled into the ambulance and brought to the hospital. Me and Bernard both knew that something was up. The cops knew something we didn't and were doing nothing to try and find this guy. For what reason, I'm still not sure. It's a year later now and all of us are still shaken up about this. Hector healed up fine. Bernard moved across the country to the West Coast and I'm still living in Worcester. The police never followed up with us or tried to ask us more questions about the stabbing or the hitchhiker. I'm surprised they never even tried to pin it on me or Bernard. They just never got back to us, but that's neither here nor there. Oh, and another thing, to this day, sometimes when I'm driving I'll get a feeling I'm being watched and look over to my passenger window and see the hitchhiker's face staring back at me, smiling his impossibly wide smile. Something's following me, and I can feel myself beginning to change, somehow. I was hiking with my friend Greg when I made the mistake of walking down some stairs into an earthen tunnel. It led us off a mountain forest trail in West Virginia. I assumed the Greg I met when I came back up the stairs was the same one I'd left behind. He wasn't, and I didn't really realize what had happened until I was already far away from the spot I came through. And I think, until I can find those stairs again, or another set like them, I'm trapped here. If you want to know exactly how it all happened, it's in my last post. This world looks a lot like ours. There are things here that look like regular people, like my friends and family, at least until they open their mouths. When I tried to escape them, I barely got away. They converged on me the instant they realized what I was doing, and I thought that was it. And then one of the reminders on my phone alarm went off. It makes the sound of a bell chiming over and over again. The things that looked like my family all started screaming and covering their ears. That's when I saw their teeth razor sharp, like a shark's. I left the alarm on as I ran like hell for the nearest tree line. By the time I reached it, my phone's battery had died. I kept running. I ran as hard and long and as fast as I possibly could. I don't even know how many of them, if any, tried to catch me. It's dark here, even during the day, weirdly dark. The sky is always clouded over, and the leaves and pine's needles overhead grow, though thick they almost block out the whole sky anyway. Things here look normal, but it's like everything is just a little bit wrong, alive in ways it shouldn't be. I got desperate enough to try picking and eating some random berries. The little spray of black at the top of them that I thought were leaves turned out to be spindly, curled up legs. The berries swarmed up my arm and bit me. Now it's covered in boils. It even smells bad here, like something's rotting no matter where I go. But the worst part is the deer thing. About 15 minutes after I first stopped running, by the time I stopped breathing so hard that I couldn't hear much over my own breath and the crunch of leaves and sticks as I walked, I heard the footsteps. It didn't take me long to identify that they weren't human or human-like, that it was something with 4 legs. I have spent a lot of time in the woods. After all, by then it was night, and everything was really dark. I could barely see anything, and was mostly moving forward by feel. That's when a voice called out from behind me, Greg's voice. Not the fake Greg, but the real Greg who spoke English. I froze on the spot. I wanted to call out to him. It made sense that the real Greg would have followed me down the tunnel when I didn't come back out, that he might now be here in this world with me. But I don't trust anything about anything anymore. The footsteps and the calling continued. I looked over my shoulder a lot, squinted into the dark, trying to see what it actually was. When I finally made out what looked like a pair of antlers on a very definitely 4-legged body, I took off again. But I was slow and clumsy, tired, starving, pathetic. The thing kept a steady pace behind me, but from the sound of it, it was struggling too. It must have been, or else it definitely would have caught me. But I was getting more exhausted by the second. What felt like hours into this, I stumbled across a cave. The opening was long but extremely low to the ground. The kind of thing I might be able to get into and out of easily, about which some weird-ass creature could not. Or at least I hoped so, because I was just too tired to keep going. So I slid into the cave. Lying on my belly, I felt around carefully to see how high the ceiling was throughout the space and to check for drop-offs. I found that there was just enough room for me to sit up, and then I found something else. Something that felt like canvas, and then a zipper, and straps. It was a backpack. I unzipped it, felt around, and actually thanked God out loud even though I don't technically believe in Him when I found, among other things, a bottle of water, a flashlight, granola bars, beef jerky, mini USB cables, a miniature folding solar panel, and a portable battery bank. The downside of turning on the flashlight was that it allowed me to see the dried blood stains all over the outside of the pack. Before long, I heard the footsteps again. I turned off the flashlight. They got closer and closer. For a long time, the thing seemed to pace back and forth, maybe a yard or so outside the entrance of my cave. It called my name. It called for help. Again and again. I'm human, it said, over and over. It's me. It's me. It made weird, choked off sobbing sounds. It's just me. I lay there and didn't move a muscle until finally the pacing and the pleading stopped. I charged my phone. I ate and drank. I wrote this. I feel weird. I feel like I'm even writing differently than usual. I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, I'm going to sleep now because I just can't not anymore. I'm not sure why I'm writing this down. I don't have internet out here in the woods, but it helps to think this might not be the end, after all, and maybe I'll get a chance to post this somewhere. Maybe I'll meet other people who went through this, and I'll feel sane again. Anyway, good night. It's not a deer. When I woke up, it was lighter outside. I couldn't hear anything but more or less normal forest sounds. I looked out the cave, trying to avoid being seen by anything already out there. I just saw trees. Grabbing the backpack, I dragged it out of the cave with me. There was a spot outside where the underbrush was all pressed down, like something had bedded down in it. There were reddish-brown smudges on the leaves and in the dirt. I tried not to think about it too much, and started on my way again. The plan was to walk north, back in the direction of the forest I'd first come through in. I walked for about 2 minutes, and then I stopped. The deer thing stepped out of the deeper shadows just up ahead of me, into what passed for bright light in this place, and I saw it clearly for the first time. Saw the human flesh and the human bones, pulled apart and contorted until they fit the vague approximation of a deer. Saw exposed ribs spread to wide at the bottom, and the loose loop of intestine that hung from the open cavity to drag below it. A bit of actual deer had been fused into specifically the antlers and part of a skull, but the eyes were still Greg's. I screamed. I turned. I ran. That was a while ago. I collapsed in the most sheltered spot I could, when I could, and fell asleep again. I haven't seen the deer, Greg, since I first ran from him. Now I'm near a small town, and I've got service again. I guess that must mean there's a town there back in my own world, too. I guess Wi-Fi crosses the multiverse. Who would have guessed? I'm resting as I write this, eating the last bit of beef jerky. Pretty soon, I'm going to have to find some other source of food, unless I find a way home first. But people in my last post said that this might be the Phi realm, or one of the place where those stories come from. Anyway, what if what they say about the food is true? What if eating it will really trap me here for good? I guess I better hope I get out of here. And soon, really soon. I've kind of stopped being scared of this place, and that worries me. Now the only thing I'm scared of is Greg. I feel so guilty for just running away from him, but what could I possibly have done?